Hey, what's up, guys? This is Chaplain Cannon. So I'm coming at you a little bit differently than normal. We got hit up with a COVID surge, so to speak, and so we're all teleworking from home. So hopefully this will be able to replace in-person suicide prevention and also be able to help those out that don't have Teams or another way to attend a meeting. But without further ado, this is the suicide prevention class, in intervention brief. And we're going to be using the model of ACE today just because that's the one that I'm familiar with and it's the one that I like to go with. But before we start, I wanted to ask you guys to imagine what a suicide-safe community would be. What would life be like if we didn't have anybody that committed suicide? I think one of the gravest mistakes of individuals that do commit suicide is thinking that it is something that doesn't affect everyone around them. When in reality it affects everyone. It affects leadership, it affects subordinates, it affects our family members, even our in-laws. It affects everybody. And when somebody does commit suicide, it is so impactful for people that are closest to you that at times it takes a long time for them to heal. And a lot of counseling. And so I want you to imagine, what would a suicide-safe community be like? Where nobody has to go through this type of traumatic event, where nobody has to really feel the pains that come with knowing somebody or witnessing somebody commit suicide. I would argue that it would almost be like heaven, to be quite honest with you. So I want you to kind of think about that, and how can we possibly prevent suicide? And I also want you guys to realize that as we go through this training, to realize that each and every one of you has to play a part in this. If there's something that I can't do all the time, it's be there all the time. And so I need you guys' help in this. But let's get into some of the statistics. In 2017, believe it or not, there were 511 active suicides. And it actually only got even worse in 2018. As a matter of fact, I would argue that, believe it or not, suicide is something that just doesn't seem to be going away for any of us within the service. The more I study about it, the more I realize that it's an ever-increasing problem. As a matter of fact, it said in 2018, 541 active duty service members committed suicide. That's 24.8% per 100,000. If you're not familiar with numbers, that's a lot. That's a tremendous amount. As a matter of fact, I was doing some studying and I found a study online that I think surveyed about 150,000 people. And it was interesting how they used this particular study. They used veterans as our own demographic. So they had white, they had black, Hispanic, Asian. Then they used veterans as our own demographic. And what was interesting is that we only took up 5% of the actual people surveyed, and yet we took up 22% of the actual suicides. And that's incredible. That's a lot. And that means that we almost took up a quarter of all the suicides out of 150,000 people when we only took up 5% of the population. That's incredible. That means that we have an issue in the Army, and that means that we need to be able to do something about that. When it comes to unreported suicides, believe it or not, there's 5 to 25% more suicides than are actually reported. That comes from people not necessarily knowing how somebody died. So it is believed that suicides are actually higher than originally thought. Non-fatal suicide behaviors, believe it or not, that is 40 to 100 times greater than the number of actual suicides. And once again, the number of people affected by suicide is everybody around you. And it's an extremely large number. I know first sergeants and sergeant majors, even commanders, that still to this day, that have bracelets on their arm from soldiers that have committed suicide. And I've watched how a lot of times first line leadership or company leadership or even sergeant majors, battalion leadership have struggled to get back on track after one of their soldiers has committed suicide. It is one of those things. It is really impactful to everybody around them. And I want you guys to know that you're loved, that you're cared for, at least, in our minds. That we want to see each and every one of you get home one day to have a good and healthy lifestyle with a good and happy family. And it just wants you to realize, you're not alone out there. That's extremely important to understand. When it comes down to spousal suicide, believe it or not, that's actually high as well too. We have 186 reported suicide cases for the spouses in 2017. So for whatever reason, I don't know why this is, but we have this stigma in the Army where we believe that our spouses aren't capable or able to reach out to, say, a chaplain or maybe even a behavioral health specialist, when that's actually their right. You know, as a chaplain, one of my jobs is to take care of the family members, to take care of the children and the wives or the husbands, whatever the spouse circumstance may be. That's one of my jobs, is to help them out. And so I want to encourage you guys, if you run into that type of situation, you have individuals that you can reach out to. There's behavioral health specialists, there's doctors, there's counselors out there, there's chaplains, there's all kinds of different avenues that you guys can go to. And I want you to really understand that and take advantage of that. But when we move into this, so now we're gonna go with ACE as the model of intervention. And that stands for ask for your buddy, care for your buddy, and escort your buddy. Now, when I look at this slide, a lot of memories come back to mind. And I remember, you know, certain times when I was a senior NCO, we didn't have a chaplain around. As a matter of fact, being in recruiting command, the nearest chaplain was halfway across the United States. And so a lot of times the only person that you were able to reach out to was your NCO channel. And I remember a couple times when we had suicide attempts, there's individuals with suicidal ideation, and I remember feeling so inadequate or so unequipped, not capable of taking care of the situation. But one thing I did was I fell back on my training. And it's amazing how when you run into a situation like this, you know, you're trying to rush and you're trying to think of something amazing to say, something that is going to save the individual's life. But in reality, you know, what's going to save that person's life is by you intervening, by you being there, and by you taking care of that person. I've been doing a lot of studying lately, and Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Lee, he's a chaplain in the United States Army. He did a study. His PhD research was focused on PTSD growth and how we can be an enabler in our community and how we can potentially affect PTSD, suicide prevention, all that kind of good stuff. And what he found was that community is the #1 influence when it comes down to high-risk behavior. So what that means is that you don't have to be the expert. Sometimes somebody that wants to commit suicide is just simply looking for somebody to reach out to listen to have somebody listen to them, to feel validated, to feel like they're not alone. And that's incredibly important, because now you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a doctorate degree. You don't have to be this incredibly trained person. You just have to be you. You just have to be there, listen to the person, and validate everything they're going through. That's incredibly important, because it puts everybody in the fight. And it makes each and every one of us an active member when it comes down to suicide prevention. But what are some of the risk factors and protective factors when it comes down to suicide? You know, what about failed relationships or family history of suicide? Those are big ones. You know, I've talked to a lot of individuals that have, maybe they're going through divorce, they're breaking up with their girlfriend or their boyfriend, whatever it is, and they feel as if they're never going to meet another person again, like their life is over. They're just a failed individual. That nobody's ever going to love them. And that's huge for a lot of people. And I know for some people, they look at you and they say, man, why are you being so weak? But what you don't understand is that certain people come from certain places in their life where certain social issues or whatever issues they're going through have impacted them tremendously due to their past. You know, it's the more you study about behavior and the more you study about psychology, you realize that we are a product of our past. And so when you see a person that's really struggling, there may be something deeper that they're not telling you. And so I want to encourage you guys, when you are being a buddy to the individual that's trying to commit suicide, when you're being a part of that community, you're not there to judge that individual. You're not there to try to make things better. You're there to listen and to validate what they're going through and to help them understand that they're not alone. That is very, very important. Some of the other risk factors are poor social skills. Individuals that, especially those individuals that come here to Germany, and they're sitting here for 6 months. They don't have any friends. They can't necessarily get off post because nobody speaks English. They don't know where to go. Maybe they don't even have a car if they're a young private that doesn't have enough money. And they just sit in those barracks rooms all alone. That's important. We need to check up on our people. Mood disorders such as depression or PTSD. These are big ones. A lot of times you can see a person, spiraling. But when it comes down to mood disorders, as a leader in the Army, we should be so involved in our soldiers' lives that we are able to tell and understand when they're going through something. That we're able to recognize when they're not normal, when things are off keel, so to speak. And so we need to be involved in our soldiers' lives, and that's just part of being a good leader. And I encourage you guys. It's as an NCO, I used to always get involved in my soldiers' lives. Sometimes they called me nosy, but it was for their own good. I really tried to make a difference in their life, and I wanted to be an influence in their life, and somehow I always wanted to leave them better than when they came to me. And that was my leadership philosophy, is one thing that I always wanted to do. Drug and alcohol abuse. When you see a person that's just binge drinking like crazy, that's sometimes that can be a sign. I know a lot of times, especially here in Germany, we might just be partying or whatever. But if you see a person that doesn't necessarily drink that much, and then all of a sudden they're drinking a lot, that can be a sign. Even a person that drinks a lot all the time, that could also be a sign. Somebody that's using drugs when they know that we have a drug policy in the Army, that's a big issue. Financial stress, legal UC, non-judicial punishment, that is also very, very big. When I first came here to Germany, I can't tell you who it is, but I think it was about a week after being here. We had a female in another battalion outside of our direct command, believe it or not, who received UCMJ, Arc of 18, and she slit her wrists. And the only reason why she is alive right now is because her roommates saw the blood coming out from underneath the door. So those are some of the risk factors. Some of us may receive UCMJ or non-judicial punishment, and we may see that as the end-all be-all to our life. And I want to let you know right now that that's not the case. It's more of I don't want to say it's a slap on the wrist, because I don't want to downplay UCMJ, but it's not the end-all be-all to your life. And I don't ever want you to think that. But if we do end up having a soldier that gets UCMJ, we all need to be concerned about that individual and watch how they're reacting to it, because each one of us reacts differently. Once again, our past comes to play in these things. Protective factors. Like I said, when it comes down to protective factors, community is massive. And one of the top protective factors is social relationships, family, friends, battle buddies, church groups, small groups, whatever it is, hobbies, stuff like that. These things are incredibly impactful. Like I said, PhD research is showing that is the number one factor when it comes down to suicide prevention. Available health care, physical and mental health care, such as chaplains, psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors, anybody that you can reach out to, your chain of command, whoever. There are people out there that are willing to help that don't want to see you go down that path. Coping ability, learning how to be resilient. One of the things that I'm learning through studying is the influence that religious beliefs have on an individual's ability to cope. It's incredible. It's actually one of the top resiliency methods when it comes down to depression, anxiety, substance abuse, all kinds of different things. Our religious beliefs actually affect our moral and ethical behaviors, and even affect who we hang out with. And so I encourage you, as a chaplain, and I'm supposed to encourage you guys, as a chaplain, get involved in your faith group. Believe it or not, it'll help you out tremendously. And that leads me to the next one, which is a belief in higher power or faith. Like I said, that lays the foundation for resilience right there. Participation in group activities, getting help when needed, personal and professional values. These are all critical when it comes down to understanding the risk factors and protective factors of suicide. Now, like I said, the warning signs, you're looking at alcohol, substance abuse, relationship issues. But the key thing that I want you to take away from this slide right here is the changes in behavior. That's the key thing. If you're the type of leader where you're not involved enough to where you can't really recognize when a soldier is going through something drastic, or you can't recognize a change in behavior, then you really need to check your leadership style. You should be so involved in that soldier's life that you should be able to recognize the smallest detail when it comes down to change. That soldier should feel comfortable coming to you when they're having issues, when they're struggling in life. Now, it's incredibly important. I can't stress that enough. And one of the things that I think a lot of us need to pay attention to, which I've seen a lot of us pay attention to, is just disturbing texts, posts, email, pictures, stuff like that. These things are huge. I've actually prevented a couple suicides just based off of looking at things on social media. I remember I had one soldier who literally just posted goodbye. And next thing you know, I'm actually having to save his life because he was thinking about committing suicide that day. And it was just a simple text in his email, or I'm sorry, a Facebook post that literally said, all it said was goodbye. And I knew from that moment on, I knew I had to get involved. And I mean, literally, I ended up saving his life that day. And thank God he's gotten the help that he needs. He struggled with a lot of PTSD and other issues, but he did get the help that he needed. And right now he is doing fantastic. He's a good family man, and I'm incredibly proud of him. But that's one thing that I keep an eye out, especially when it comes down to social media. But ask your buddy. So when we get down to that part, how did you ask? Now, a lot of us believe, and this is kind of interesting because it's counter what you believe. A lot of us believe that if we ask somebody, are they thinking about suicide, that it's actually going to push them over the edge. That it's actually going to put the idea in their head. When in reality, it's not. It's actually going to make things better, because what you're doing is you're admitting to the person that you're willing to talk about the issue, that you're willing to open up about the issue. And so I don't want you to ever be afraid to ask, are you thinking about committing suicide? Are we talking about suicide? Do you have a plan? That's incredibly important. Understanding that the individual has a plan. But usually when you ask, are you thinking about committing suicide? That person will look at you. They'll look a little shy and embarrassed at first, but they'll look at you as a person that they can open up to, because a lot of times they just want to communicate what's going on. There might be some issues that have happened recently. Maybe something in the past has kind of triggered something that is currently going on. And I really, a lot of times they just want to sit down and talk and just get things off their chest. And by you simply asking that, you are playing a part of the community. You are validating that they are not alone. You're validating that you're there for them. And so I really encourage you guys to play an active role in each other's lives. And don't be afraid to ask your buddy, are you thinking about committing suicide? And like this thing, level 2 says, you seem off your game, down. What is worrying you? Asking those types of questions and trying to get to the root of the problem. These are incredibly important because it shows that you care for the person. When it says, how do you care for your buddy? This is also a very big step, because I've seen some people that sit there and say, well, I'm going to care for that person. I'm going to go get some help. And they end up leaving the person alone when that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about sitting there, asking them questions, practicing active listening. For those of you that don't necessarily know what active listening is listening with an intent to listen rather than with an intent to respond. I know a lot of times when we get angry, when we get frustrated or mad at maybe our spouse or a child or whatever, we're not really listening to them. We're listening with an intent to respond, meaning we're waiting for a few key words so that we can respond in a very hateful or derogatory manner. Or maybe even if we're just kind of being selfish in the conversation and we're not listening to what that person is the point that they're trying to make, maybe we're just trying to, hear a few key words so we can inject our own opinion or whatever. That's not what active listening is, and that's not the type of listening that you need to do here. You need to practice active listening, sitting there and hearing every detail of their story and trying to understand where they're coming from. This not only shows that what they're saying is important, that they are valuable, but it also shows that they are validated, that they're not alone, that you are there for them, that you got their back no matter what the circumstance. But just sitting there and talking to them can be so absolutely crucial and vital in that very intense and brief moment. So I encourage you, when you talk about this, when it says, ask your buddy, are you thinking about committing suicide? And then, well, what's going on? Can you please explain to me why you're thinking about committing suicide? Why is this affecting you so deeply? What can I do to help? Listening and asking those important questions, but never judging, never coming at the person from a judgmental manner, never trying to decrease what they're going through, but listening with an intent to listen and understand. And last, it's escort your buddy. I can't stress this enough. I'm sorry. Don't ever leave them alone. When a person is at that point where they're willing to take their life, when a person is at that point where they're willing to open up about potentially taking their life, they are screaming for help inside. They need that help. Don't leave them alone. Walk with them to get them to the ER. Walk with them to take them to the chaplain. Walk with them to get them to the doctor, whoever it is that your closest source of help can be. But don't leave them alone until you get them to the help that they need. Keep them talking, keep them feeling validated. That's incredibly important, and not just because, not just because you're trying to prevent a suicide, but because you actually care, and that's incredibly important as well. We are, and I don't want to say an army of one, an old slogan that we had, but we have battle buddies in the Army. We care for one another. We're a special brotherhood. We have a special bond, and we got to take care of each other. Let's face it, some of us are 4,000 to 6,000 miles away from home, and we are literally all we have for each other. So I want you guys to take care of each other. So once again, ask your buddy, are you thinking about committing suicide? Care for your buddy by active listening, asking them what's going on, validating how they're feeling, and then escorting your buddy to get them the help. That is so vitally important. We're not going to do this role play exercise, but last and certainly not least is the stigma that comes down with going to get some help. I know about 3 or 4 sergeant majors. I think about 4. I'm thinking about it now. I think maybe 4 or 5 actually sergeant majors and colonels that I know of that have gotten help that probably wouldn't be here today if they didn't get the help that they needed. So I want you to take away that stigma that if I go to get the help that I need, it's going to hurt my career, that it's going to get me kicked out of the Army. I want you to get rid of that. There are privacy laws for a reason. HIPAA just doesn't exist for no reason at all. The chaplain, with the level of confidentiality that I have, that doesn't exist for no reason. We have avenues to which you can get the help that you need, places that you can go to that you can feel safe. And so I want you to understand, there's confidentiality out there, but there's also, I want you to get rid of that stigma that if I go get that help, I'm going to be looked down upon, because you're not. You're going to be looked up. You're actually going to be looked up as a hero, in my eyes at least, because you're getting the help that you actually need. And I think that is so absolutely critical and vital, because I want you to think about this before I let you go. I want you to think about this, and if I could keep this in your mind. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Once again, let me say that again. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I want you to know life changes, especially in the Army. We PCS every couple of years. Leadership changes out quite significantly, quite often, and so you might be running into a situation where you think things aren't going to change. That you can't, you don't want to push through anymore. You don't want to live anymore, and yet you find out that in just a few short months, life could be completely and totally different. I've known so many people in my military career that have gotten the help that they need and are doing very well. They're living life in their marriage, they're raising children, they're even taking command, or they're a sergeant major somewhere, or they're advancing in the ranks, they're getting education, but they're living life. But at one point in their life, there was that point in time when they thought about taking their life and not living anymore. And I just want to get rid of that stigma. I want you guys to know that I love you. I'm here for you, as well as each one of our chain of command. We're all here for you. We don't want to ever push you away from getting the help that you need. And so I encourage you guys today, once again, be active in each other's lives. We are the community. We are the best defense against suicide. And there's nothing greater than that. We can prevent suicide just by being a community. You don't have to be an expert, but what you do have to do is you have to care. You have to ask your buddy. You have to ask them. You have to care for them. You have to escort them, and you have to get them the help that they need. And like I said, once again, never shame them for that, because there's nothing wrong with that. But that's all that's going to be here for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the class. We kept it fairly short just because I know that it's going to be on YouTube. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and if you ever need me, my contact information is going to be at the end of this video. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.